Imagine one ordinary Thursday night in Los Angeles changing the entire course of your life. Not because you did something brave, not because you planned for it, but because you ran, and you ran into exactly the right door. This is the story of Reese Blackwell, a 28-year-old hotel concierge who believed, with every fiber of her being, that she had already survived the hardest chapter. She had already walked away from the relationship that tried to hollow her out. She had already rebuilt, quietly, carefully, the version of herself she was proud of. She was not looking for anything. She was not hoping for anything. And then, Marcus showed up at the Meridian Grand on the worst possible night, the night of the Golden Sound Awards, when the most famous faces in music filled every corridor of the hotel she had worked in for 4 years. And something inside her chest did what it always did when she saw him. It seized. She ran. She did not know, as she pushed open the door of Suite 1408, that the man inside, a man the entire world recognized, a man whose voice sold out arenas from Seoul to São Paulo, would become the one person in her life who looked at her and simply refused to look away. What happens between them across the next 3 weeks is not a fairy tale. It is something messier, more honest, and far more worth it than that. It is a story about what it costs to let someone see you, truly see you, when you have spent years learning to be invisible. If you're new here, subscribe. You don't want to miss what comes next. Drop a comment below. Have you ever run from something and found yourself exactly where you needed to be? The Meridian Grand Hotel had 42 floors, 817 rooms, and on the third Thursday of October 2024, it housed approximately 60% of the most recognizable people in the music industry. Reese Blackwell had been working the concierge desk since 6 in the morning. It was now 10:30 at night, and her feet ached. Her smile had graduated from genuine to professional somewhere around hour 9. And the only thing keeping her upright was the knowledge that her shift ended at 11. She was 28 years old. She had worked at the Meridian for 4 years. She knew this building the way she knew her own apartment. Which corridors had the best light, which elevator was slowest, which guests tipped generously, and which ones treated her like furniture. She was good at her job. More importantly, she was good at being invisible when she needed to be. That skill had not always served her well. She was cutting through the 14th floor service corridor, a shortcut she used when the main hallways clogged with event traffic, when she heard the voice, not loud, not aggressive, just close. Marcus. She knew his voice before she processed his face. 4 years of listening to that voice, in its warmth, in its coldness, in the particular register it took on when it was about to say something designed to make her feel small, and her body still recognized it before her mind could intervene. He was 30 paces down the corridor, talking to someone, turned away from her. But in 3 seconds he would turn, and he would see her. Reese did not think. Her body made the decision before she did. She turned left, grabbed the first door handle she reached, and pushed. It opened. She stepped inside and eased it shut behind her, pressing her back against the cool wood, eyes closed, heart slamming. The room was dim. The curtains were drawn against the Los Angeles skyline. There was a suitcase, several suitcases near the wardrobe, and on the coffee table, a room service tray that had barely been touched. She was in someone's suite, a guest's suite. She had approximately 2 seconds to process this before a voice came from the direction of the bathroom. It said, in a tone that was perfectly calm and completely deadly, "Who are you, and how did you get in here?" Reese turned. He stood in the bathroom doorway, hair damp, a white hotel towel at his waist, another draped over his shoulders. He was looking at her with an expression she could only describe as controlled fury, the kind of anger that had been trained and disciplined into something far more dangerous than shouting. She had no idea who he was. She had no idea, in that moment, that the entire 14th floor of the Meridian Grand had been blocked off and security cleared for exactly this reason. She had no idea that the man standing in front of her was Sang-Jun, lead vocalist of Elix, one of the 5 best-selling musical acts on the planet for the past 6 years. She just knew she had walked into the wrong room, and she needed to get out of it. "I'm so sorry. I work here. Concierge staff. I was using the service corridor and She stopped. She was lying and she knew it, and she was fairly sure he knew it too. "I needed to not be in that hallway for about 60 seconds. I am so sorry. I'm leaving." She reached for the door handle. "Stop." She stopped. Not because she was afraid of him. She stopped because the word carried something she hadn't expected. Not a command exactly, but a question wrapped in one. A why. "You heard something." "Yes." "What did you hear?" She looked at the door. She looked at him. He had not moved. He was simply watching her with that precise, calibrated attention. And she realized, distantly, absurdly, that she had never in her life been looked at quite so carefully. "Someone I didn't want to run into. That's all. I really am leaving." "Your hands are shaking." She looked down. She hated that. She had worked very hard, over the past 2 years, to stop doing that. "I'm fine." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he walked to the wardrobe, pulled out a robe, and disappeared back into the bathroom. When he emerged again 30 seconds later, he was wearing the robe, and he walked to the small sitting area and settled into one of the chairs with the unhurried ease of someone who had decided, quietly, that the situation was no longer an emergency. "Sit down, just for a moment. Then you can leave." Reese Blackwell stood at the door of Suite 1408 and looked at this stranger who was offering her, what exactly? A chair. A minute. A pause. She sat down. His name, she learned, was Sang-Jun. He did not offer his last name. She did not offer hers. This felt, somehow, like a mutual and reasonable agreement. He ordered tea, not for himself, for her. And when it arrived, he set it on the table in front of her with the quiet practicality of someone who had learned, somewhere along the way, that people in distress needed small concrete things more than they needed words. She wrapped both hands around the cup. "You don't have to tell me anything." "Good, because I wasn't going to." Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. "Oh, how long have you worked here?" 4 years. "And tonight was the first time you've hidden in a guest's room." Obviously, he agreed. And this time there was warmth underneath the word. Something dry and almost amused. And she felt herself exhale for the first time since she'd walked through his door. She drank the tea. He sat across from her and looked out the window at the city. He did not fill the silence with small talk, and she was grateful for that in a way she could not have articulated. The way you're grateful for rain after a long, dry season, instinctively, physically, before you've thought about it. She had been 24 when she met Marcus Vale. She'd been new to Los Angeles, new to the job, new to the particular loneliness of a city that made you feel anonymous even when you were surrounded by people. He was charming. He was attentive. He made her feel, for the first time in a long time, like someone worth paying attention to. By the time she understood what was happening, she was deep in it. It was never dramatic. That was what made it hard to name, hard to explain to people who asked. He never raised his voice. He never left a mark. He simply, over months, over years, made her smaller, questioned her memory, told her she was too sensitive, reminded her, in 100 quiet ways, that her perception of things was not to be trusted. She left him at 26. It took her another 6 months to stop second-guessing whether she'd made the right call. She was 28 now. She was fine. She was genuinely, actually fine. Except that tonight Marcus was downstairs at the Golden Sound Awards after-party. She'd seen his name on the guest list 3 days ago, and had been bracing herself. And the moment she heard his voice in that corridor, she knew. 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 Every piece of careful, hard-won steadiness had scattered like paper in the wind. She hated that. She hated that he still had access to that part of her without her permission. "You okay?" She looked up. Sang-Jun was watching her. "Yes. Thank you for the tea. I should get back to my shift." He nodded. He didn't push. She stood. She straightened her jacket. She walked to the door. "Hey." She turned. He looked at her from his chair by the window, the city glittering behind him like something from a film she hadn't seen yet. "Whatever it was you were running from, you don't look like someone who runs." She didn't know what to say to that. She left. She went back to her desk and finished her shift and drove home and sat in her car in the parking garage for 11 minutes before she went inside. And the whole time, she thought about the way he'd said it, not as a compliment, as an observation, like he'd looked at her and seen something she hadn't shown him. She thought about that for a long time. She was not supposed to see him again. Elix's security team had the 14th floor locked down. The guests on that floor were not her guests. She had no professional reason to go anywhere near Suite 1408. So she was surprised, the next morning, when she arrived at the concierge desk at 7 a.m. and found a handwritten note waiting for her. It said, "The tea helped. Thank you for the company. SJ." She stared at it for a full minute. He'd asked someone for her name. He'd left a note. She had no idea what to do with either of those facts. Her colleague Priya appeared at her elbow, read the note over her shoulder with zero shame, and delivered her verdict in 2 words. "Suite 1408. I know where it's from. He came down himself at 6:45 to leave it. I saw him. No security, no entourage, just him in a baseball cap being extremely normal. Priya. I'm just providing context." Reese folded the note and put it in her jacket pocket. She told herself she was going to throw it away when she got home. She did not throw it away when she got home. Elix was in Los Angeles for 4 days. They had press on Friday, rehearsal on Saturday, a performance at the Meridian's Grand Ballroom on Sunday evening as part of the Golden Sound closing events, a private concert for industry guests that the hotel had been coordinating for 3 months. On Friday afternoon, Reese was walking through the 14th floor corridor on legitimate business. A VIP guest on 14 had requested a restaurant reservation that required a personal delivery of paperwork. When she nearly walked directly into Sang-Jun coming out of the elevator, he stopped. She stopped. Concierge. Not unkindly, like he was placing her. Guest, she returned, who is technically not supposed to be in this corridor without his security team. I gave them the afternoon off. That's not really how it works. They disagreed less than you'd think. He looked at the envelope in her hand. You're working. I'm always working. Would you be working near the 14th floor lounge in about an hour? I was told it's empty on Friday afternoons. She looked at him. He looked back. There was something in his expression that was not flirtation. It was quieter than that. More careful. It was the look of someone extending something and being genuinely uncertain whether it would be accepted. I have a break at 4. He nodded. I'll be there. He was already there when she arrived, sitting at the window with a cup of coffee and a phone he set face down on the table the moment she walked in. She noticed that, the deliberateness of it, the way it meant, I am here. You have my attention. She sat across from him. Tell me something true. No preamble. No small talk. She blinked. That's an odd opener. I have approximately 300 conversations a week. 98% of them are the same conversation. I'm very tired of that conversation. She understood this in a way she hadn't expected to. She spent her working life being exactly what guests needed her to be. Helpful, efficient, appropriately warm, professionally invisible. She knew what it felt like to be tired of performing a version of yourself. Something true. Okay. I hate Los Angeles in October because everyone acts like 70 degrees is cold, and I want to defend myself against that every single day. The almost smile again, more of one this time. Where are you from? Atlanta. You. Seoul. How long have you been doing this? The music, the touring. Since I was 19. I'm 26 now. She did the math without meaning to. 7 years. He'd given 7 years to something before he was old enough to know what it would cost him. Do you like it? He considered this with a seriousness she hadn't expected. I love the music. A pause. I love performing. The rest of it is a tax I pay for the parts I love. That's very honest. You asked for true things. They talked for an hour. She told him about Atlanta, about the job, about the particular satisfaction of solving problems for people, the logistical puzzle of it, the way a perfectly arranged itinerary was its own small art form. He told her about the 7 members of ELEX, about the way cities blurred together on tour, about how he had started writing music at 14 in his childhood bedroom in a neighborhood of Seoul, where no one was supposed to amount to much. He did not ask about the night before. He did not ask about Marcus, did not ask about the shaking hands or the panic she hadn't quite managed to hide. He simply did not go there. And that restraint, that deliberate, respectful restraint, was somehow more intimate than if he'd pressed. When her break ended, she stood. Same time tomorrow. She should have said no. She had very good reasons to say no. Same time, she said, and then caught herself, and almost laughed at herself for catching herself, which told her something she wasn't ready to hear yet. Saturday was different. She came to the lounge and he was already there, but he had a notebook open on the table and he was writing, not on his phone, in actual handwriting, in a notebook with a worn cover and pages that looked like they had been through several time zones. He didn't notice her for a moment, and she had 3 unguarded seconds to watch him be completely unperformed. He looked different like this. Still him, but with all the surface layers off. She sat down. He looked up. Lyrics? She asked, nodding at the notebook. They're being difficult today. What's the song about? He looked at the page. Someone walking into the wrong room. Reese said nothing. She looked out the window at the Los Angeles afternoon. I'm not writing about you. I started it 2 months ago. But... He stopped. But now you have better material. But now I understand what I was trying to say. She looked at him then. He was looking at the notebook. The afternoon light was doing something particular to the room, and the city was laid out behind the glass like a reward for surviving the week. And she felt something, quiet, warm, frightening, beginning somewhere in the center of her chest. She ignored it. She had been doing that for 2 days. She was fairly good at it. Can I ask you something? Anything. The note. You came down yourself to leave it. Why? He thought about this. Because you did something the night before that took courage, even if it didn't look like it from the outside. You were honest with me when you didn't have to be. That deserved more than nothing. She had been told, over the years, many flattering things by many people. Compliments about her efficiency. Compliments about her smile. Once, memorably, a compliment about her handwriting. No one had ever said anything to her that landed quite like that. She didn't know what to do with it. So she picked up his pen from the table. What rhymes with wrong room? That isn't terrible. He laughed. It was a real laugh, startled out of him, unpolished, completely genuine, and it was the most unguarded she had seen him. And she thought, oh, this is the problem. She was already in trouble. Sunday came too fast. The private concert was that evening. The Meridian's ballroom was full of industry guests in evening wear, the kind of crowd that wore their importance like a second outfit. Reese was not attending the concert. She was working the lobby, managing the flow of guests and cars and the various small crises that materialized whenever this many important people were in one place. She didn't see Sang-Jun before the performance. She hadn't expected to. What she hadn't expected was to be standing near the ballroom entrance at 9:15, redirecting a confused guest, and to hear Alex's music from behind those doors, to hear his voice, amplified and perfect, and completely different from the voice that had said whatever it was you were running from across a small table, and to feel something clench in her chest that she absolutely refused to examine. She went back to work. At 10:40, she was at the concierge desk when her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer it. "It's me. I borrowed someone's phone. The concert just ended." "I know. I could hear it from the lobby." A pause. "Could you hear me?" "Yes." Another pause. Longer. "We leave tomorrow at noon." She had known this. She had known the checkout time for every guest on 14. She was very good at her job. "I know. He stopped. She heard something in the background. Voices. The controlled chaos of post-concert. "I don't want to leave without saying something." "You don't have to say anything." Reese. She had not told him her name, which meant he had found it out, which meant he had wanted to know it. "Go be with your team. You just finished a show. Will you come up? 14. In an hour." She should have said no. She had very good reasons to say no. All the same reasons as before, and several new ones. "An hour," she told him, and hung up before she could change her mind. She went up at 11:30. The 14th floor was quieter than she'd ever heard it. The rest of the team was in the suite 2 doors down. She could hear music, muffled celebration. She knocked on 1408. He opened the door. He was still in his performance clothes, dressed for the stage, hairstyled, and yet the way he held himself was completely stripped of performance. He stepped back to let her in. The room looked different than the first night. The suitcases were still there, but they were open now, half-packed, a life mid-disassembly. There was sheet music on the desk beside the notebook. The room service tray from the first night had been replaced by a bowl of fruit he had clearly ordered and barely touched. She sat on the sofa. He sat across from her. "You didn't have to come." "I know." "I'm glad you did." She looked at him steadily. "Sang-Jun, we have known each other for 3 days. I know. You live in Seoul. I live in Los Angeles. You perform for 50,000 people at a time. I make restaurant reservations for executives. I know all of this. So. A breath. I'm telling you anyway. These 3 days have been the most honest I have had in a long time, maybe in years, and I know that's strange to say to someone you've known for 72 hours, but I think you're someone worth being honest with." She felt it again, that thing in the center of her chest. She pressed it down. "I'm also someone with a complicated history," she said quietly. "Someone who has spent 2 years learning not to make decisions from that seized-up place in her chest that says yes before the rest of her has caught up." He didn't push. He just looked at her. "I know. I'm not asking you for anything right now. I just wanted you to know." They sat there for a while, the city doing its indifferent, glittering thing beyond the curtains, the muffled party continuing down the hall, and she thought about what it meant to be careful. Whether careful was wisdom, or whether, sometimes, it was just fear wearing a responsible disguise. She left at 1 a.m. He walked her to the elevator. They did not touch. When the elevator doors closed, she stood in it alone and pressed the button for the lobby and told herself, "That's it. It's done. It was 3 days, and now it's over." She believed this completely. She believed it right up until the moment she didn't. The story broke on a Tuesday. Alex had been back in Seoul for 11 days. Reese had returned to her ordinary life with the deliberate discipline of someone who had decided not to want things she couldn't have. She worked her shifts. She called her mother. She went to the farmer's market on Saturday morning the way she always did. And she did not check Sang-Jun's social media, not even once. She was doing very well. And then, at 7:42 on a Tuesday morning, her phone started going off. The first text was from Priya. "Are you seeing this?" The second was a link. The headline read, "K-pop idol's secret hotel tryst. Exclusive photos." The photos were blurry, taken from a distance, clearly from a phone camera through a partially open door. They showed her walking into suite 1408. They showed her leaving, the following morning, in her work uniform. They were time-stamped. They were captioned with language that left nothing ambiguous about what was being implied. And the source, according to the article, was an anonymous tip from a hotel guest who had witnessed the comings and goings. Reese sat at her kitchen table and read the article 3 times. She knew immediately. She didn't need to think about it. She knew the way you know the shape of someone in the dark, by instinct, by memory, by the particular weight of their presence. Marcus had been at the after-party. Marcus had been on 14. She'd seen his name on a guest list she'd processed. Marcus had seen her come out of that elevator at 1 a.m. in her work uniform, her face doing whatever her face had been doing. Marcus had made a call. Her phone rang. Unknown international number. She answered. "I just saw it." His voice was absolutely level, the kind of level that took enormous effort to maintain. "I know who did it. I know who did it too. My team has already been briefed. I want to know how you are." She almost said fine. It was her default, her armor, the word she reached for when she didn't want to need anything. "I'm angry. I'm really angry." "Good. Stay angry. Don't go small." She blinked. "What?" "Whatever you're feeling right now, don't make yourself smaller to manage it. I've seen what you do when you're scared. You make yourself invisible. Don't do that. This isn't your fault." She was quiet for a moment. "How did you know that I do that?" "Because I watched you walk into a room and check every exit before you sat down. I watched you answer every question about yourself one level shallower than the truth. I watched you decide, very deliberately, not to want anything." A pause. I noticed you." Something cracked open in her chest, not painfully, like a window. "My management team wants to put out a statement," he continued. "A clean one, hotel staff, professional interaction, nothing improper. Which is true. Is that okay with you?" "Yes, that's fine. That's accurate." "Reese." "Yes." That's not all it was. She closed her eyes. "No," she said softly. "It's not. I'll call you tomorrow." He called her the next day, and the day after that. The hotel, for its part, was not silent. Her manager pulled her aside that same afternoon, a quiet, careful conversation in the back office, and Reese braced herself. But the statement from Elix's management had already reached the Meridian's PR team. Clear, professional, airtight. Her manager looked at her across the desk and said simply, "They've confirmed it was a staff guest interaction consistent with her duties on the night in question. We're treating it as closed. Are you okay?" It was the first time in the entire ordeal that someone had asked her that without needing anything from the answer. She told him she was fine. This time, she almost meant it. They talked every day for 3 weeks. She learned things about him the way you learn things about a place you keep returning to. Gradually, in layers, in the way a city reveals itself differently at different hours. She learned that he was the youngest of 4 children, and that he had an older sister who sent him voice memos of his niece saying his name badly, and that he listened to them on planes because they were the thing that made him feel most like a person. She learned that he was a perfectionist about his own work, and quietly, protectively easy on the people around him. She learned that he had been in love once, at 22, with someone who had not been able to love him back the way he needed, not out of cruelty, just out of incompatibility, and that he had been careful with his heart since then, careful but not closed. He learned things about her, too. About her mother, Diane, who worked as a school administrator in Atlanta and called every Sunday and never let a conversation end without saying something that made Reese feel known. About the year she was 25 and barely functioning, and how she'd rebuilt herself not through some dramatic transformation, but through small daily choices. Getting up, going in, doing the work, being of use. About the fact that she played piano badly and loved it anyway, and that this was maybe the purest form of pleasure she knew. Doing something just because she loved it, without any pressure to be good. I want to hear you play. Absolutely not. Why not? Because you're a professional musician and I play Clair de Lune like it's being performed underwater by someone with oven mitts. He laughed. It was becoming her favorite sound. She had not admitted this to herself yet, but she knew it the way you know a song. Not consciously, but in the body, in the automatic reach toward it. I want to hear it anyway. Call me after the Seoul leg of the tour, and maybe we'll discuss it. Is that a promise? It's a maybe. I'll take it. The tour schedule had him in Seoul through November, then Tokyo, then Singapore. She followed it without mentioning that she followed it. She did not check his social media, but she did check the tour dates, which was a distinction she found she could live with. The weeks passed. The story about the photos died down. His management team had handled it cleanly, and Marcus had not surfaced again. She did not think about Marcus often. When she did, it was not with the old seized-up fear, but with something cleaner, a kind of weariness, and underneath that, something almost like gratitude. Because Marcus had pushed her into the wrong door, and the wrong door had been exactly right. She sat with this thought for a while. Then she sat with something else. It was a Sunday in late November when Reese Blackwell finally told herself the truth. She was at the farmer's market. She had her coffee. She had her bag. She was looking at a display of persimmons and not seeing them at all, because she had just gotten off the phone with Sang-Jun 20 minutes earlier, and she was still in the aftermath of his voice. He had called from Singapore. It was 11 in the morning for her and 2 in the morning for him, and he had been awake because he couldn't sleep, and he had called because she was the person he wanted to talk to when he couldn't sleep. He'd said that simply, without strategy, the way he said most things, and she had answered, and they had talked for 40 minutes. And at the end of it, he'd said he had to try to get some rest before the morning rehearsal, and she'd said, "Okay, take care of yourself," and he'd said, "Reese, I miss you. I just want to say that." She'd said, "I know, get some sleep." She had not said it back. She was looking at the persimmons, and she was thinking about the 2 years she had spent learning to trust herself again, about what it meant to choose carefully, about the difference between careful and closed. She thought about the way he'd said, "Whatever it was you were running from, you don't look like someone who runs." She thought about the notebook and the laughing and the tea and the morning note and 3 weeks of phone calls and a voice saying, "I miss you," without asking for anything in return. She took out her phone. She opened the browser. She looked up flights to Seoul. The next available flight with a seat in her budget left on Thursday. She would arrive Friday morning Seoul time. She had 3 days of PTO she hadn't used. She had a contact number that she had never texted, only called. She bought the ticket before she talked herself out of it. Then she bought a persimmon because she was standing right there, and it seemed like the kind of small grounded thing you do when you have just made a decision that terrifies you. She called her mother on the way home. "I did something." Diane Blackwell listened. When Reese finished, her mother was quiet for a long moment. "About time." "Mom, baby, I have been watching you be careful for 2 years. Careful is good. Careful kept you safe. But at some point, careful just becomes standing still." A pause. "You're not someone who stands still." Reese sat in her car in the parking garage and cried a little. Not from sadness, from the particular relief of being known completely. She did not tell Sang-Jun she was coming. The flight was 14 hours, and she slept for 4 of them and spent the other 10 alternating between certainty and full catastrophic doubt. She made lists in her head of all the reasons this was reasonable and all the reasons this was absurd. And the reasonable list and the absurd list turned out to be the same list, which she found more comforting than she expected. She landed at Incheon on a Friday morning in early December. The air was cold and clean and completely different from Los Angeles in a way that felt, somehow, like being told the truth. She went through customs. She found a taxi. She gave the address of the venue. She had looked it up. Elix had a fan event that afternoon. A scheduled public appearance, the kind of information that was freely available if you knew where to look. She was not going to the fan event. She was going to the hotel 3 blocks away from it, where she had booked herself a room and where she planned to text him and let whatever happened next happen next. She sat in the hotel room. She looked at the city from the window, low gray sky, the particular texture of a winter afternoon, everything simultaneously foreign and strangely legible. She had been awake for 22 hours. She should sleep. She texted him instead. She wrote, "I'm in Seoul. I'm at the Riverstone Hotel. I didn't plan this particularly well, but I'm here if you want to." She deleted the last 4 words and just sent, "I'm in Seoul. I'm at the Riverstone Hotel." She put the phone face down on the bed. She lasted 40 seconds before she picked it up again. No response. He was at the fan event. His phone was probably off or in someone else's hands. She put it down again. She fell asleep sitting up against the headboard. She woke up to knocking. She looked at her phone. 2 hours had passed. There were 4 messages from an unknown Korean number that resolved itself, on inspection, into his number. The messages said, "In order, what? I'm on my way. Are you okay? Say something." She typed, "I'm fine. I'm at the hotel. I fell asleep." The knocking came again. She understood. She crossed the room. She opened the door. He was standing in the hallway in a heavy coat, hair slightly disheveled from clearly having moved fast, and he was looking at her with an expression she had not seen on him before. Not the controlled fury of the first night, not the careful warmth of the lounge afternoons, but something open and undefended and enormous. "You came." "I came." He looked at her for a long moment. The hallway was empty. Somewhere down the corridor, a door closed. "I missed you too," she told him. "I should have said it when you said it. I'm saying it now." Something in his face shifted. Settled. The way things settle when they've been braced for impact and the impact turns out to be relief. He stepped forward. She stepped back into the room. He came inside, and she closed the door. And for the first time in a very long time, Reese Blackwell did not check the exits. They ordered room service and ate it sitting cross-legged on the hotel bed, the kind of meal that is really just an excuse to keep talking. And outside the window, Seoul did its evening thing, the lights coming up one by one across the basin of the city as the sky went dark. He told her about the fan event, about the particular surreal joy of it, the way it never got ordinary, hundreds of people who had built a relationship with his music, with the songs he'd written in small rooms when he was trying to say something true. She told him about the flight, about the list she'd made in her head, about the persimmon she'd bought at the farmer's market in Los Angeles, while she was still pretending she hadn't already decided. He laughed at the persimmon. She had known he would. "I've been thinking about what this looks like. Practically. Me too. I have 6 more weeks of touring. Then I'm in Seoul through March, mostly recording. I have a job in Los Angeles that I'm good at and I like. I know. I'm not moving to Seoul. I know that too. So, we figure it out. That's what I want to do. I want to figure it out." He looked at her steadily. unless you're going to give me the list of reasons it doesn't make sense. I already gave myself that list on the plane. It was very thorough and completely unconvincing. His face did the thing she had spent 2 months trying not to memorize and had memorized anyway. I wrote a song, the one I was working on in the lounge. It's finished now. The Wrong Room song. We're calling it that now. What are you calling it? He said the title in Korean. Then he translated. Exactly right. She looked at him. It's about finding the thing you didn't know you were looking for by going through the wrong door. Outside, Seoul kept going, the way cities do, indifferent and brilliant and enormous. Inside the room, there were 2 people eating room service on a hotel bed and working out, slowly and without a roadmap, what it meant to choose each other. It was not simple. It was not going to be simple. But Reese had spent 2 years learning the difference between things that were hard because they were wrong and things that were hard because they mattered. She knew the difference now. She could feel it, not in the seized-up chest panic way, not in the way that made her want to check the exits, but in something steadier, something that sat low and warm and certain in her. This was the second kind of hard. She could do the second kind. The song dropped in February. Reese was at her desk at the Meridian Grand. It was a Tuesday afternoon, quiet, the post-holiday lull that settled over the hotel every January and lasted through mid-February, when Priya appeared at her elbow with a set of earbuds and a look on her face that communicated several things at once. It's out. I know. He posted it this morning. It has 40 million streams. I know. The fan translations say the title means exactly right. I know that too. Priya put the earbuds down on the desk. Are you going to listen to it? Or are you going to pretend you haven't already listened to it 17 times this morning before you came in? Reese picked up the earbuds. The song opened with piano. Simple, unhurried. The kind of melody that sounded like it had always existed and someone had simply found it. His voice came in a measure later, low, direct, doing what it always did, which was make you feel like it was saying something specifically to you. She listened with her eyes closed for 30 seconds. Then she took the earbuds out and set them on the desk. Well, it's good. That's all you're giving me. It's very good. Priya looked at her for a moment. Then, he's coming to LA in March. The label announced this morning. A press tour. Reese already knew this. She and Sang-Jun had talked about it last weekend on a video call that had lasted 3 hours. The kind of call that starts as a check-in and turns into the 2 of you eating breakfast in different time zones and not wanting to hang up. March was 6 weeks away. She was not counting. She was absolutely counting. I know. Priya shook her head slowly. Now you are the most understated person I have ever met in my life. Thank you. That was not a compliment. Reese smiled. She turned back to her screen. She had a restaurant reservation to confirm and a car service to schedule and 3 guest requests sitting in her inbox. And she was good at her job, and she liked it, and her life was hers. Built carefully and kept carefully, and now, for the first time in a long time, held open to something she hadn't planned for. Outside the Meridian Grand, Los Angeles was doing what it did in February, pretending it was spring. The jacarandas not quite blooming yet, but showing the intent of it. The city in that tentative preseason where everything feels like it's about to begin. She had a text from Sang-Jun that morning. It said, 6 weeks. And then in parentheses, I know you're counting. She had responded, I have no idea what you're talking about. He had sent back a single emoji, just a door. She had laughed at her desk, alone, at 7 a.m, and it had felt completely ordinary and completely extraordinary, which was, she had come to understand, exactly what happiness was. Not a destination, not an arrival, just the ongoing, unremarkable miracle of choosing right.